Arthur is a tyrannical king who rules over the world with an iron fist. During his ascent to the throne, Arthur slaughtered his enemies, nuked cities, and committed countless atrocities, all in the name of power. But one day he reflects on all the things he has done. He's overcome with a sense of guilt, and in the next moment he dies of a heart attack. As he is slowly descending into the abyss, a voice calls out to him and says it will give him a second chance at life, so he had better not mess it up this time. A few moments later, Arthur opens his eyes and finds two people looking down at him. The man says his name is Reynold and he is Arthur's father, while Alice over here is his mother. They don't really expect their newborn baby to understand what they are saying, but they are so excited to have him. Arthur slowly comes to the realization that these people really are his parents and he was just born a minute ago. He's still finding it hard to believe that he's a baby again, but he can't deny that his parents are really good at taking care of him. Overall, he is pretty happy, but he still doesn't like the fact that he is stuck in a baby body. He's got an oversized head, he can't speak, and every couple of hours he shits his diaper involuntarily, so he has lost all control. But then he notices something that's even stranger than his current circumstance. He watches as Reynold channels energy into his fists and proceeds to smash a boulder to pieces. Arthur is amazed because this is a power that he knows nothing about, despite all his years as the ruler of the world. This feat is apparently quite an impressive one, so Reynold is proud of himself and turns to his family, so they can praise him, but he fails to pay attention to his surroundings, so a rock falls straight into his head. Alice was worried something like this might happen, so she then goes over to him and starts using magic to heal Reynold's injury, but she warns him to be more careful next time he wants to show off. Reynold may have just been trying to show off, but when he gets serious, those fists are no joke because he can easily one-shot a wild boar when he goes out hunting, and having him around makes things a lot easier for his party members. By the time the hunting trip is over, Reynold returns to his family and is ready for a welcome back hug, but then he remembers that he is still covered in boar blood, so he's going to have to get cleaned up first. Arthur has learned two things from seeing this. 1. This world is so dangerous that it is common for people to own weapons for their protection. And 2. He's going to have to learn how to fight if he wants to live freely in this world. Now that Reynold is back, Alice says it's time to put Arthur down for a nap, and normally he'd be upset about being treated like a baby, but this is one part he actually enjoys. Back in his previous life, he rarely ever got the chance to sleep peacefully because people would always try to assassinate him when he least expected it. Of course, he could easily defeat any attackers that came after him, but it was incredibly stressful. Months pass and Arthur's baby limbs are finally strong enough to allow him to move around on his own now. The first thing he does with his new mobility is go over to a mirror so he can take a long hard look at himself. His parents think it's cute that Arthur is so mesmerized by his reflection, but he is just coming to terms with the fact that he really is a baby. Anyway, since Arthur can move on his own now, when Alice puts him down for a nap later that day, he sets his plan into motion. As soon as she leaves the room, he opens his eyes and throws his blanket out of the crib so he can climb down and escape his crib. He then proceeds to crawl across the floor while Alice is busy doing the dishes, and she must be really focused on those dishes, because Arthur makes it all the way to the other side of the room without her noticing. Once he gets there, he opens the door to the house's library and pulls out a book because he needs to learn more about this world. After reading one of the books, he learns that this continent is called Dicathen, and it is divided into 3 kingdoms. The Dwarf Kingdom, a nation of dwarves that live in vast cave cities. The Elenoir Kingdom, a nation of elves who live deep within the forest. And the Elven Kingdom, a kingdom of humans ruled by a king, although here no one ever nuked the cities to take over. Arthur still wants to learn more, so he pulls out another book and it gives him some much-needed answers. Arthur had noticed that the level of technology in this world is lacking, and the reason for that is the presence of magic. People are able to use magic by manipulating the mana within their bodies, and while it's not exactly common, magic is a huge part of life in this world. People can use magic in 2 ways, namely augmentation and conjuring. Augmentation involves circulating mana within your body, granting the user incredible strength, defense, and agility, while conjurers can project their mana outwards and use it to control any phenomenon they desire. That pretty much sums up the info about this world's magic system, but Arthur doesn't find anything about the healing magic Alice used earlier, so he assumes she must be an exception of some sort. From what Arthur can tell, most people manifest their mana when they hit puberty, and by channeling that mana through something called a mana core, one can learn to control it and become a mage. This is easy for Arthur to understand, because in his previous life he rose to power thanks to the innate power of ki within him. It functioned the exact same way as mana, so he tries focusing all his energy to see if he can generate a reaction, and sure enough his mana core begins to develop. This is a huge step forward in Arthur's development. Before he can do any more training, Alice finally finds him. She's been worried sick ever since she found out he wasn't in his crib, so she's glad he wasn't hurt. But while she's holding him up, she notices that something is different about him. Arthur is worried she might have sensed the mama within him, but she actually just noticed that Arthur pooped himself again. 2 years go by and Alice is writing in her journal one day. She's so grateful that Arthur is growing up strong and healthy, but she's starting to grow a little concerned because she hasn't seen Arthur smile even once since he was born. Just then, she notices Reynold and Arthur outside, and it looks like Reynold is giving Arthur some sword lessons. Arthur seems pretty interested, but Alice is furious that Reynold would let a 2-year-old swing a dangerous stick around. By now, Arthur has realized that Alice isn't someone you want to get angry, so he's going to have to be careful not to make her mad. To avoid any other dangerous activities, Alice decides to take Arthur out for the day to show him around the town, and Arthur is particularly excited about this because it will give him a chance to gather valuable first-hand information about this world. He can discern the level of this nation's technology by looking at the weapons that are sold to the general public, and he also gets to see various substances that he has never encountered before. Best of all, he got to witness a mage casting fire magic up close. So overall, today's trip proved to be incredibly valuable for him. By the end of the day, Arthur's baby body is exhausted from all the activity, so he is struggling to stay awake and Alice wants to put him down for a nap as soon as they get home. As limiting as this new life has been, Arthur has come to enjoy life with loving parents. In his past life, Arthur got dropped off at spawn with no starter kit, so he was forced to live his entire childhood in an orphanage and never got to experience parental love, so this is a nice change of pace for him. Arthur soon falls asleep on Alice's shoulder, so she starts carrying him to his crib, and along the way she tells him how proud she is of him for learning so much. She has noticed all the times he sneaks out of his bed to read books, and she saw how excited he was to see the outside world, so she is sure he has an adventurous spirit. She assumes he must have gotten that from Reynold, and sooner or later, Arthur is bound to want to leave home to see the world on his own. Personally, she would prefer it if Arthur lived a peaceful life here, but as long as he is happy, she will support him no matter what. The next day, Arthur is standing by the window and watches as Reynold begins practicing in the front yard. He is interested in seeing the applications of magic up close and personal again, so he eagerly watches as Reynold begins circulating mana within his body. Eventually, rocks begin to fly up from the ground, and Reynold makes it seem like it's the greatest thing in the world. But in reality, it is pretty pitiful. This is the limit of Reynold's skill when it comes to conjuring, but that's because Reynold's specialty is augmentation, so his magic is much more efficient when he sticks to using it within his body. Seeing his father's power motivates Arthur to go do some training, but just when he's about to climb down from the table, Alice tells him it's time for his nap. Arthur still can't speak yet, so he starts whining as they pass the bookshelf, but Alice tells him he needs to take a nap, so there's no time for books right now. Normally there would be nothing Arthur could do about this, but he recently learned a legendary technique, pouting. Arthur has mastered the art of weaponizing his cuteness as a baby, so even though Alice still wants to put him down for a nap, she eventually relents and just lets him read his book. Once Arthur is alone, he begins practicing with his mana core, and over the past 2 years he has managed to get pretty good at it. By gathering various fragments of mana within his body, he was able to generate a mana core within himself, and although it was incredibly strenuous, it was well worth it. Now, with just a little more effort, he should be able to cast his first spell, but Arthur drastically underestimates the strength of his mana and accidentally blows up the house. Alice and Reynold were outside when the explosion happened, and it was so huge that Reynolds' back gets burned up really bad, but he and Alice are otherwise alright. However, they soon realize that Arthur was still in the house when it blew up, so they rush inside to check if he's still alive. There's no way a baby could have survived an explosion of that magnitude, but when Reinald reaches the library, he is shocked to find that not only is Arthur completely unharmed, he was also the source of the explosion. He's barely 3 years old, so it shouldn't have been possible for him to use magic until he was at least 12. Yet Arthur is already practically a master of mana. He stands proudly and looks at his parents, but he forgets that the house is falling apart. So when 2 roof beams fall straight towards him, he is completely caught off guard. He tries running away, but his stubby baby legs fail him, so it looks like he's done for. Fortunately, both Alice and Reynold rush in to save him, and while Alice shields him with her body, Reynold uses his magic to block all the debris and save them both. Arthur is a bit shocked since this is the first time anyone has ever risked their life to save him, but Alice is so relieved that he is alright that she starts crying. Arthur still isn't used to having people care about him like this, so seeing her cry makes him cry as well. That brings the episode to an end. Thanks for watching. Want next part? Subscribe the channel and turn on notification bell.